Chapter 1188 of One Piece should have been called Mom Come Get Me because I'm not having fun. This chapter was a wild ride to say the least. So in this video, I'm going to give you my full breakdown, all my thoughts, and all the potential theories that are popping up on what's about to happen next. But before we dive into it, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other chapter breakdowns. We got a new color spread from Oda this week, and it was absolutely gorgeous. But outside of it being pretty art, I have a couple cool things that I would like to point out. First and foremost, we have Franky and Robin together in their own ship, and I am absolutely shipping the two of them. I am a Frobin believer all day long, so I love to see it, more fuel to that fire. Also, if you look on the other side, we have Jinbei swimming by a bunch of sharks who are all saluting him, it seems like. And of course, that is right and proper for the first son of the sea. And then lastly, if you look at the bottom right corner, we have a depiction of all of us in the fandom. That little fish is just like me for real. But with all that being said, let's dive right into this chapter. And it starts off with a conversation between Imu and Joy Boy, seemingly over some kind of communication device. I do personally wonder what kind of device they were communicating on, because we know the Void Sentry was way more technologically advanced than our current time. So was this a Den Mushi, or was it just a cell phone? And something I find interesting about this is when he's calling this person, Imu obviously introduces themselves as Mu, which I find interesting because I've been sitting on a theory about the king, Imu Nerona, making a contract with the devil, Mu. So those two are two separate entities that now reside in one body. Obviously with the devil Mu having majority, if not all, of the control. And I also theorized that it was possible that Imu Nerona, the king before the contract, was friends with Joy Boy, based on a small panel we got a few chapters ago with the two of them seemingly laughing together. But this confirms that when Joy Boy met Imu, they were already assuming this position of Mu. So Imu goes on to say that indeed, Joy Boy is long dead. So why is it that Luffy reminds him so much of that time? And of course, per usual, Luffy says, how the heck would I know? In this first panel, we have Imu reaching their arm out, and we have these black flames starting to wrap around them. And for some reason, I can't help but think about the times when Luffy reaches his arm out and starts to twist it like a corkscrew so it can get more power when he throws a crazy punch. And that feeling continues when we see Imu actually land this punch on Luffy. His arm stretches and contorts in a really weird angle. And I just can't help but think that this entire fighting style really resembles the same way Luffy fights. And maybe this is something that Imu learned from their battles with Joy Boy. Or it could even allude to the fact that Imu's Devil Fruit abilities might be relatively similar to Luffy's. Another interesting note here is that these flame sprites, being sentient, are noticing when Luffy is dodging and is telling Imu, or maybe Imu's attack, which direction to take. But as we see here, Luffy takes that hit and it is not looking good. And I hate to say it, it does not get better from here. And over the next couple panels, we see Luffy bouncing back and doing his best to throw counterattacks at Imu. But no matter what he does, Imu is having no problems blocking these attacks. And Luffy even mentions, well, I was able to hit you before, what's going on now? But after easily blocking all of Luffy's attacks, Imu loads up another round of black fire sprites. And once Luffy realizes that running is not going to help since these are chasing him, he loads up a Gum Gum Gatling, and it seems to work for the time being. And as Imu reacts to this, we see Luffy setting up another Gum Gum attack. And this time we get a new form we have never seen from Luffy before. We get Gum Gum Genie. And honestly, this whole panel made me laugh. I'm consistently impressed with how often Oda finds a way to slap humor right in the middle of genuinely one of the most tense fights we've ever been in the entire story. Luffy burst out in this genie form with a massive ho 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 ho, honestly looking a lot like Santa Claus. Another interesting note about this genie form before we move on, if you look at his turban, the clasp on it is actually a piece of meat as well, which is just so perfect for Luffy. And in this moment, he says, I saw your fight with Loki, and I won't let his death be in vain. Obviously showing that Luffy thinks that Loki is dead right now. Loki immediately responds saying, dude, I'm still alive. What are you talking about, you moron? And Luffy's like, oh hey, cool, you are still alive. This whole moment was comedic gold. But the moment Loki starts to speak up, Imu loads up yet another shot. And in the same moment, Ragnar is panicking, just trying to help his boy Loki from his injuries. And our best boy decides to stand and take the blast for Loki. Even though Chopper is our #1 mascot, we have a really good contender coming up with Ragnar. But this next panel is something I feel like the One Piece community is going to overlook more than anything else in this chapter. And that is the fact that Jinbei is able to block this attack from Imu seemingly with no problem. This is, without a doubt, Jinbei upscale. And that's a dub. Jinbei has not gotten a lot of chances to shine since he's joined the Straw Hats. I'm not saying he has had none, but not as many as a lot of people would like. And especially here in this arc in Elbaf. But seeing this moment is incredibly hype. So massive W's in the chat for our boy Jinbei holding it down. Luffy is shocked to see Jinbei jumping in the way of this blast. And the first son of the sea says, hey, do you know this guy? Do you need me to protect him? And Luffy says, yeah, that's my boy, take good care of him. while at the same time the other Straw Hats are pontificating about who this person could be. Obviously, they know about the Holy Knights and they know about the Elders, and as far as the populace knows, the Elders are the highest level of authority within the world government. So who the heck could this demonic entity be? I genuinely wonder if the Straw Hats are actually going to find out what it is they're dealing with here. Because as much as the Straw Hats have seen all of these atrocities that are happening all over the world, I don't think Luffy specifically has gotten a grasp on who's controlling all of this and why all of these bad things are happening on all of these islands. Yes, of course, we've had some warlords causing the problems and also some emperors causing the problems. But especially early in the story, the biggest issue that we were dealing with were the Marines. And while I understand Luffy is very focused on his own goal while happening to help all of these other places on his journey, I think it's really time for him and the rest of the Straw Hats to figure out what the heck is going on and actually face this threat with some legitimate urgency. But more on that once we finish this chapter. We jump to the ice block that Princess Shuri is slowly melting out of, and we see that she is actually almost free. And funny enough, the other Straw Hats are like, what do we do with the frozen person? Like, what are the next steps after she gets out of this ice block? And we get a response saying, well, we've seen Luffy and Robin be frozen, so we know how to deal with this. And then in shock, the other Straw Hats say they've been frozen? And if you don't remember, this is a reference back to chapter 320 when Luffy and Robin were fighting Aokiji. He ended up fully freezing Robin and only freezing one of Luffy's arms. But that's a really cool piece of lore drop they added right there. But moving on, we have Imu wondering why Gunko wasn't able to break the ice herself. Which I don't personally understand because Imu sent their own shots at this ice just a few chapters ago and Imu was also unable to break the ice, so why would his subordinate be able to instead? My only other thought is when he was launching that blast at the ice, he was actually trying to gift Gunko that extra boosted power that the other two Holy Knights got. And he was expecting with that boosted power, she would be strong enough to break that ice. But as we know, this is a primordial ice that cannot be undone without the help of Ragnir. But either way, I find that a bit odd. And another terrifying text bubble here is Imu actively recognizing who Brook is, saying a man with an afro calling Gunko Princess Shuri. This could be a potential death flag for Brook, but we'll talk more about that later on. And yet again, while Imu sits here and contemplates something, Luffy comes through with literally my favorite named attack from him ever, which is Gum Gum Caught You Slippin' Bullet. Absolutely wild that this is literally written on the panel. I love it to death. But as cool as this attack is, Imu blocks it easily with one hand. And Imu responds with, have you not been paying attention? Were you not watching what happened with Loki despite his size? And in this moment, two of the black fire sprites fly into Luffy's genie beard. And the moment those fire sprites land, Imu launches another stigma. And this pretty much confirms to me that these fire sprites are homing mechanisms for the stigma attack. Whatever those fire sprites are on, stigma will guaranteed hit. So to dodge this, Luffy has to go back to his smaller size. So in a fight against Imu, size absolutely matters. Short kings rise up because you have a chance. But I do find it interesting that Imu was pointing out to Luffy that his battle IQ is kind of lacking here. Generally, I think Luffy has a fantastic awareness of the battle and what he needs to do to get through it, but Luffy did not pinpoint the fact that Loki's size was his biggest hindrance when it came to fighting Imu, especially when Imu has a guaranteed hit attack that just needs a homing mechanism on you. And also, I'm a little bit disappointed that we got this whole Gum Gum Genie thing and it literally did nothing. We got a really funny name that also had nothing to do with the genie. I just feel like this is a little bit out of place. Like, it fits very well in character for Luffy to do something wild like Gum Gum Genie, but to what end? What was Luffy's goal in all of this? What crazy attack was Luffy preparing to do as a genie that some other form wouldn't be able to do? Because at the end of the day, this caught you slipping bullet might as well just be a hockey-coated punch. So after Luffy narrowly dodges the stigma attack by changing back to his original Gear 5, he goes on the run yet again, dodging these black flames as best he can. After sending a couple more shots at Luffy, we see Imu start to pull a new weapon out of this demonic halo he has. And this time it's the Blade of Nothingness, Vohu. The word Vohu is Hebrew for void, and I'm not gonna lie, this is one of the sickest looking swords in the whole series. I love the black swirly design they put on the blade, and of course the fire coming off of it always exudes aura. And this is another thing I find interesting. We've now seen at least 3 different blade attacks from Imu. Obviously this one, the Blade of Nothingness, Vohu. We have the Blade of Judgment, Nemesis. And then we have the Blade of Wrath, Graham, with the word Graham basically meaning wrath. And there's an interesting theory I have floating around this demonic halo in these weapons. Obviously, every time we've seen Imu's halo specifically, it has a bunch of eyes in it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say counting the eyes makes any difference because virtually every panel we see this halo in, it has a different number of eyes because Oda simply can't draw that super consistently with all of these different angles. But the theory goes that these eyes are potentially the eyes of the 19 kings that came together to form the world government we know today. And just as these kings threw their blades down at the front of the throne, I think that these blades could possibly be the weapons that they used. Imu is summoning the power of these 19 kings that he took advantage of 800 plus years ago. And going off of that 19 kings thing, it is possible that Imu's powers are actually incomplete because he didn't get all 20. He did not get Nefertari Lily. So this could potentially be pointing to the fact that Imu may not be at full power even at their best, or I could just be overthinking this whole thing. But I do feel pretty strongly that these eyes have a notable significance in how these powers work. But as he pulls this flaming sword out, the forest around him begins to dry up. As Luffy notes this fact, he jumps into the sky to get a better view and a better angle to attack Imu from. And then Imu says, "Of course you're not Joy Boy." Joy Boy was not this weak, while he stabs this flaming blade through Luffy's chest in one of the most gruesome panels we've gotten in One Piece since Marineford. And with Luffy bleeding profusely not just from the sword but also the flames that hit him at the same time, the chapter ends. And wow, I knew it was going to be bad. I truly did not expect Luffy to win this fight in any capacity, but I didn't expect it to be this gruesome. Are we finally having some stakes put into these fights? I've been very vocal over these last few chapters that with everything that Imu has been doing, none of his attacks seem to actually have any stakes to them. He chopped off Gurd's fingers and they were back on 2 chapters later. He sent 2 laser beams through Loki and he's still kicking over there. Maybe he's not doing so great, but he's not going to die from those injuries, at least not yet. Imu has attacked Zoro, Sanji, and Hajradin, and obviously Zoro and Sanji are still back in the fight. We haven't seen Hajradin yet, but I am absolutely confident that he will be virtually unscathed. Now Imu has stabbed Luffy, our main character, straight through the chest, giving him a wound that nobody should be able to survive. So what happens now? Well, let's cook. But even as gruesome as this moment is, we all know that Luffy is not going to die from this. Kaido basically killed him not once but twice, with the second one obviously creating the Gear 5 moment. So we know that him being our main character and obviously the sun god, the god of liberation, the guy who's gonna save the whole world, he's gonna have to survive this somehow. And my easiest explanation for how Luffy survives this is gonna be the same way that most main characters survive their big tragic battles. Villains almost never double tap the main character. Imu, without a doubt, could end the story right here, right now, today. But that doesn't make for a fun ending to One Piece. So I'm confident that Imu is probably just going to throw Luffy off of his sword, send him flying somewhere across Elbaf, and obviously Chopper is going to find him and heal him up. But even though this isn't going to kill Luffy, I do think this is going to be one of the most pivotal moments for him in the story. Much like we saw at Marineford and then at Sabaody, when Luffy experiences true loss, true despair, he locks in. It might take him a second. We might need our GOAT Jinbei to give him one of the best pep talks in anime history, like he did after Marineford. But this is going to be the moment that Luffy realizes that he can't play around anymore. Luffy has been on this silly, fun, goofy journey of kind of doing what he wants while casually liberating all of these countries. But I don't think that Luffy has stopped to take the time to really think about what's going on in the world. Like I said earlier in this video, I don't think Luffy has understood the gravity of the situation the world is in up until this moment. Luffy fights with no regard for himself, which is one of his best qualities because he fights with everything he's got to protect the people he cares about or the people who are in need. But that being said, that led to this moment specifically. I feel like this chapter was inherently highlighting the fact that Luffy is a little bit too goofy and silly when it comes to these fights. Because what was the point of Gum Gum Genie? Gum Gum Genie was absolutely useless. It was a waste of time, it was a waste of energy, and eventually it led to him getting ran through by Imu. Imu has already fought Joy Boy before. Imu has intimate knowledge of the heights that somebody with an awakened Gum Gum fruit can reach. And Luffy is not at that point. This chapter was to tell Luffy that you are not that guy, but you could be. And I think Luffy hearing that Joy Boy was not this weak is finally going to be the moment that makes him lock in and realize, hey, maybe I should actually pay attention to what my powers are. I have a feeling that after this chapter, we may start to see Luffy change the way he names his attacks, and maybe even the way Luffy references himself. Throughout this entire story, we as the reader have learned that he doesn't have the Gum Gum fruit, he has the Nika fruit. It's not just a simple rubber fruit. It doesn't simply turn him into a rubber man, it turns him into the sun god. But every time someone's tried to tell him that, he's completely and utterly denied it. Which I do love about Luffy. He says, I'm not Nika, I'm not Joy Boy, I'm Luffy, I'm me. Stop calling me someone else because I am me. But I also think this is a bit of his issue because he has not accepted what his destiny really is at this point, or at least what kind of power he truly holds. But now that Luffy has seen that threats on the level of Imu exist in this world and can absolutely bar him from achieving his dreams, he might finally have to come to terms with the fact that he is in fact the reincarnation of the sun god Nika and Joy Boy. And when Luffy makes that realization and accepts who he is and the position that he has in this battle, I think that will lead him to unlocking the true potential of the Nika fruit. Another potential theory right here is that Imu takes Luffy. Why would Imu take Luffy back to Marijois when he could just kill him right now? Imu has been searching for this fruit for 800 plus years at this point, or at least so we're led to believe. And as we know, these fruits seem to have a will of their own. So it could be theorized that this fruit made a point of specifically avoiding Imu this entire time. So Imu, seeing the opportunity to finally get this fruit, he might take Luffy back to Marijois, where he can kill him in a specified room with a fruit right next to it, just like Blackbeard and his crew seem to be doing with their devil fruit hunting. If Imu can create a situation where he guarantees that he gets the Gum Gum fruit after killing Luffy, I think he would take that opportunity. Because as we know, Imu's entire thing is control. He wants to control all things that could potentially be a threat to him. So him controlling the Nika fruit, the single thing that has stood in his way this entire time, seems to actually make a lot of sense for his character. But as much as it feels like a lot of those pieces do fit, it feels like it'd be weird going on a Luffy rescue mission at this point. And with how the fans reacted to how long we didn't have Luffy in the manga with the God Valley flashback, I don't know how they would feel about us getting an entire rescue arc centered around Luffy, making all of the other Straw Hats the main characters of this series. But with those two theories presented, I really don't know which direction it would go. It's hard for me to believe that Imu would let the Sun God fruit slip from his hands, but at the same time, in classic villain fashion, it kind of makes sense that he just assumes he's dead, he assumes he's a nothing burger issue, and he just throws him off to the side to continue what he has going on. So the next question is, what forces Imu to leave this island? Because at this point, the two characters on the island who even had a shot at doing anything against Imu are down for the count. In the last chapter review, I was saying that Sanji and Zoro were going to be the ones who helped Luffy win this battle, because once they killed the Holy Knights, that would injure Imu, and potentially make him weak enough to say, hey, I gotta get the heck out of here before I lose too much. But now that Imu dog-walked Luffy in literally one chapter, I'm not sure Zoro or Sanji even have time to take out Killingham and Sommers to injure Imu to a degree that he would want to leave Elbaf. And as hype as we all were for Sanji getting Conqueror's Haki, does he have time to go through an entire internal battle while fighting Killingham to eventually unlock his Conqueror's Haki? It might not even happen during this fight at this point. Honestly, outside of whatever secret abilities Princess Shuri has with her eyes, I think Elbaf is a complete and utter loss. Like many people have been saying since Imu first appeared on Elbaf, this arc very much so could be paralleling Sabaody, providing the Straw Hats with another massive loss to push them to get stronger to be able to fight the threats that lay ahead. So at this point, without knowing what exactly is going to happen with Gunko and how she's going to be able to affect this situation, I think Imu wins. I think they successfully take the kids back to Marijois, which potentially could bring me back to an original theory that I had. If Colin gets taken from Elbaf, obviously Scopper Gabon will want to go after him. And Scopper is one of the only people on the island who knows how to properly injure the Holy Knights, which means he also could be the one to train our Straw Hats in how to do that. Obviously, Zoro and Luffy know how to do it, but Sanji needs a little bit of help. And of course, the rest of the Straw Hats could have the potential, we simply don't know. And if Imu does successfully take the kids of Elbaf, I think that would be enough for Luffy to be willing to travel back to Marijois to fight this big fight and help them get them back. But to be fair, backtracking all the way back to Marijois when we're already almost at the end of the Grand Line doesn't seem to make a lot of sense as well, and it also feels like it'll break the story up too much. But looking at the situation at hand, Elbaf has absolutely no protection at this point. But I also had another thought now that Imu is free to do as he pleases on this island. This could be the moment that Oda does truly start introducing some incredibly high stakes. Even though Imu has yet to land a decisive blow on anybody this entire arc, he could very well do that now. So we might actually start seeing some characters drop. I think Yarul is at the top of the list of characters who very possibly could die by the end of this arc. And it makes a lot of sense since he's been ruling Elbaf for so long. It's time for the next generation. That's kind of what this whole story is about. Another prime candidate is Scopper Gabon himself. Having seen how desperate the situation is, Scopper Gabon is genuinely our next in line to fight. And even though injuries tend to not matter much in this story, he is injured right now, being healed up by Chopper. So that being said, he would be entering the fight nerfed to some degree, and we also know that Scopper surely is not going to be able to beat Imu. And of course, there's a ton of people saying that Usopp might be the one to die this arc, but I genuinely just don't see it. I honestly don't think any of the Straw Hats will die. I don't think Oda has the balls to do that. It could potentially be Brook having to sacrifice himself to save Princess Shuri, but honestly, I do not think Oda would be willing to take a Straw Hat out, at least not here. There's obviously some more candidates who could potentially get taken out in this arc, but at this point, I'm not really sure who it would be. But even with all of this tragedy looming above us, I think the timer that Imu is on, being in this mortal form, is going to be the only reason that Elbaf has anybody surviving on it by the end of this. For whatever reason, Imu cannot be here for that long. So I think that will be the plot armor that Elbaf as a whole needs. But with all of that being said, what an absolutely insane chapter. I am genuinely scared for the future of this story, because we are without a doubt in the final saga, and it feels like the stakes are finally starting to rise a little bit. But as always, please let me know what you guys are thinking in the comments. Let me know your favorite theories and your predictions for what's going to happen in the future. And if you want to lock in more with this community, check out the links in the description. We have a Discord. I do One Piece streams every Sunday on Twitch. I have a Patreon for anime and manga reactions, and a bunch of other resources if you want to hang out with us more. Thank you so much for watching the video. Make sure you tell the people you love them, touch some grass, drink some water, and I will see you guys for the next chapter breakdown. Peace.